There's a prejudice that at one time was against homosexuals.
At one time.
Yeah, hold on.
5 years ago today, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled on Obergefell v. Hodges. This landmark case established that the fundamental right to marry is protected by the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, regardless of gender, and subsequently required all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and all American territories and protectorates to perform and recognize same-sex marriages, with all the same legal rights and responsibilities as opposite-sex marriages. It's been 5 years, and
It never went anywhere. It never went anywhere. People's attitudes don't change because the law changes. I know that.
even with the Supreme Court ruling, several states still cling to their same-sex marriage bans. And the fight for marriage equality is still far from over. However, for many, Obergefell v. Hodges is still a sign of progress and hope. So, in honor of 5 years of Obergefell v. Hodges, I thought that I would make a video focusing on a section of the LGBT community that doesn't get as much attention. For 5 years, here are 5 gay romances with Asian leads. Enjoy. Number 1. The Wedding Banquet. Part of Ang Lee's Father Knows Best trilogy, alongside Pushing Hands and Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, The Wedding Banquet tells the story of Wei-tung Gao. Wei-tung seems to be living a good life in New York City. He's got a good career, a nice place, and is happily together with his boyfriend of many years, Simon. However, there is one thing holding Wei-tung back from complete happiness, that being his relationship with his parents. Wei-tung and his parents all love each other very much, but the son has yet to tell his parents of his sexuality. And as the years pass, the parents become more desperate for grandchildren and start pressuring Wei-tung to get married quickly. A solution seems to present itself with Wei Wei, a mainland Chinese tenant of Wei-tung's who is in desperate need of a green card. However, as the lavender marriage proceeds, things start to snowball into a drama that is equal parts comedy and tragedy. Coming out stories are pretty common in gay media, to the point where they come with their own set of cliches and narrative traps. What makes The Wedding Banquet so valuable then is that it fails to fall into any of these traps, and Ang Lee manages to show the depth and nuance of every character and relationship. Lee could have easily had the Gao parents be fist-shaking homophobes or strict tiger parents, but their actual characterization is far more subtle than that. The reason they are so desperate for grandchildren isn't so much because of ancient Confucian principles or whatever hoary Asianism you'd like to name, but rather because they are from the generation that lived through the Sino-Japanese and Chinese civil wars. The Gaos lost just about everything in that war. When Wei-tung was born then, he was their chance at making something new, at continuing the family line and ensuring their survival. Wei-tung is painfully aware of all the sacrifices his parents have made for him, and is thus reluctant to shatter the hope they have placed in him by coming out. This leads us to perhaps the main thematic aspect of the film, that being the nature of the closet. Wei-tung, like many gay men, is closeted around his parents. But instead of taking the traditional route and having Wei-tung's journey be learning to step out of the closet, Lee spends most of the film deeply examining just why Wei-tung is closeted in the first place. Rather than assuming the closet is a bad place that Wei-tung must escape from, Lee chooses instead to examine this narrative axiom and subsequently theorize the appeal of the closet. The theory Lee posits is that being closeted is easy. Even without the issue of his sexuality, Wei-tung feels simultaneously grateful and inadequate around his father. I mean, this is a man who fought in 2 wars, built a family from nothing, and gave everything he could for his son's future. How could Wei-tung possibly live up to that? Remaining closeted then provides an excuse for Wei Tung's feelings of inadequacy. The reason I'm not happy, even though I've made a wonderful life for myself, isn't because it isn't as wonderful as the life my father made, but because I can't share a major part of myself with my family. That's it. That's the reason. However, sticking to this lie has consequences. And so the message of the film becomes that, as legitimate as one's reasons for staying in the closet may be, you have to be willing to pay the price for it. On the question of out versus in, it really isn't a matter of one option being the easy, painless path. Every route has its own prices and consequences, so before you make a choice, you'd better be sure that you're willing to deal with the outcomes of that choice. For better or for worse, till death do you part. Number 2. Saving face. Hey, did you like the half of it? Well, guess what? 15 years before Alice Wu made that film, she released this little love story. Wilhelmina Pang is a doctor living in New York City, who one day meets Vivian Xing, an out-and-about dancer who begins wooing Will after they connect at a Chinese community gathering.
How about this one? It's packed with peanuts.
And a lot of other satisfying carcinogens.
Sometimes your body knows what you really want.
At the same time, Will's mother, Gao, suddenly becomes pregnant, and due to her refusal to divulge the father's identity, she is kicked out of her father's house and settles in with Will. Being forced into close proximity with one another, as well as having their own romances that they want to hide from each other, causes complications between Will and Gao, and forces a lot of quiet assumptions out into the open. This film is a love story. However, even with the romances between Will and Vivian, and Gao and her mystery lover, the main love displayed in the film is the love between Will and her mother. I still classify this movie as a romance, because Will and Vivian's relationship is a major aspect of the film, and the issues in it allow Will to realize the issues in her relationship with Gao, but the story is equal parts romantic and family drama. All these love stories are tied together, though, by the concept of face. Face is one of those ideas that does exist and does figure into various East Asian cultures, but which has largely become maligned in Western discourse as one of those Asianisms that demonstrates how those silly yellow people are dirty and smelly and foreign and they don't understand our ways, you know. It should come as a relief then that, unlike with that other famous story starring Joan Chen,
eat. They make you very potent.
Alice Wu understands that societal concepts and ideas are less explicitly talked about and more demonstrated and performed by the participants of a society. The face is a major aspect of all the characters' relationships, but nobody ever mugs the camera and says, "Oh, yes, well, you see, as the ancient custom of face informs us, don't you know, ha 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 ha." Will's mother knows that she is gay. However, she keeps trying to matchmake her with local boys because girls are expected to marry boys and progenate with them. And it's easier to pretend that this side of her daughter does not exist than it is to deal with it and all its ramifications. And Will, for her part, does not talk to her mother about her sexuality because it is easier to pretend they are a perfect family than it is to confront her mother and demand she accept this side of her. Being happy is less important than looking happy. If you're miserable, well then, just be sure you have a happy face ready to show when company arrives. Throughout all the drama in Saving Face, there is never any doubt that Will and Gao love each other very much, but their loyalty to social etiquette hampers not only the love they share for each other, but the budding romances in their lives. However, that's what love in all its forms ultimately is. Showing your true self to someone, making yourself vulnerable to them, and hoping like hell that they accept you.
Oh, look, it's not so much about it's not about homosexuality at all. It's about what happens to you if you can't love anybody. It doesn't make any difference whether you can't love a woman, can't love a man, you can't love anybody. You're dangerous.
And love can change. Love can grow and evolve over time, as we ourselves grow older and, hopefully, wiser. Which is perhaps the ultimate uplifting message of the film. Whether it be a single relationship or a larger community, love and acceptance can grow and develop over time. You simply have to be prepared to face what that love will bring you. Number 3, Chutney Popcorn. With Nisha Ganatra directing, co-writing, and starring in Chutney Popcorn, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this film was her baby. And given the subject matter of the movie, that metaphor is particularly apt.
I know you can do it, Rena.
Puss! Come on! Harder! It's a bunny. See? I mean, that wasn't so hard. It's taking Rena so goddamn long.
Chutney Popcorn focuses on the life of Rena, a young Desi lesbian living in, you guessed it, New York City. Rena has settled into a nice routine with her living, career, and romantic situations. This all changes, though, when her sister, Sarita, discovers that she is unable to conceive. Wanting to help her sister out, Rena agrees to become a surrogate mother for her. But as the pregnancy progresses, the familiar routine Rena has settled into slowly starts to shift and unravel. One of the more unique qualities about the romance between Rena and her girlfriend Lisa is that rather than a couple who are meeting for the first time, as in so many Hollywood movies, Rena and Lisa have already been a couple for many years. And the film is not so much about their relationship beginning as it is evolving. A baby is always a paradigm shift in any relationship, and when Rita becomes pregnant, things that were left unspoken and assumed between her and Lisa suddenly come to the forefront and force them to reassess what they want out of life and out of each other. The other unique quality of the film is in how it uses pregnancy to examine the concept of heteronormativity, ooh, that's a mouthful, and how it relates to lesbians and babies specifically. Typically, when heteronormativity is discussed, it's in relation to who it is you settle down or go to bed with. Men date women, women date men, and anyone who deviates from this norm is a deviant by societal standards. Less discussed, though, is what men and women are supposed to do once they settle down, i.e., breed.
Do you ever get those pains in your stomach?
Constipation?
No. You get those pains in your ovaries hurt?
Ovulation?
No. You know when you see a baby and your clock starts ticking?
Maternal instincts?
Yeah. I've never gotten those.
Once I had constipation, and my ex-girlfriend got me this tea called Smooth Moves. It's supposed to be gentle.
This is somewhat touched upon in The Wedding Banquet. However, the difference between how that film handles the subject and how Chutney Popcorn handles it illustrates an important distinction between the baby-making pressures for gay men and those for gay women. The simple fact is that For the most part, a pregnancy does not require too much effort on a man's side. History is replete with men who didn't much care for lady parts, but who were at least willing to put in 5 minutes of hard work to continue the family line. Sowing wild oats, though, is significantly less of a commitment than growing said oats inside of you, to say nothing of raising the oats once they spring up from the ground. And while men's lives are often defined by their careers and passions, there is still a very strong belief worldwide that without children, a woman's life is incomplete. This, more than anything else, provides the crucible through which Rena and Lisa's relationship is tested as the months go by. As with any couple, there are the worries that a baby might change one partner, or reconfigure the relationship into something neither of them ultimately wants. However, as two gay women, there is an additional fear. It took years for Rena and Lisa to accept who they were and to feel comfortable in their own skins. To then go through with having a baby feels, in many ways, like a retreat back into the closet. An admission that all they really needed was to go through with childbirth to recognize the error of their deviant ways.
Do you think this child will help Rena?
What do you mean, help?
Maybe it will finally make her want a husband.
I don't believe it.
Maybe it will help her with her, disability.
Mom, stop calling it that. Rena's gay, not disabled.
Shh! What is this gay shit? I thought Rena talked like that, not you. You should know better than that.
It's not a particularly rational fear, but then again, fear and love aren't particularly rational to begin with. They're raw and real and messy. But by confronting fear, we can grow braver. And by confronting love, we can learn to love even more deeply.
And it is a terrifying thing, love. It is the only human possibility, but it's terrifying. And a man can fall in love with a man, a woman can fall in love with a woman. There's nothing anybody can do about it.
It's all just a matter of stepping outside what is comfortable and routine. Number 4, My Beautiful Laundrette. Don't worry, this one isn't set in New York City, although the TV remake with
I never remember how to do it. Kumail I don't know.
Kumail Nanjiani probably will be if it ever gets made. Omar Ali is a second-generation British Pakistani living in London, who gets a job managing his uncle's run-down laundrette. As Omar tries to turn the laundrette around and turn a profit, he runs quite unexpectedly into Johnny Burfoot, a young man from his past. When Omar and Johnny were children, they were inseparable. But once they grew older and the National Front began its Thatcher-era resurgence, Johnny's adoption of neo-Nazi principles drove a wedge between the two boys, and they haven't seen each other since. Offering Johnny the chance at a proper job and stable income at the laundrette, though, Omar is able to entice his old friend back into his life, and they slowly rekindle the love that they once shared. If I could sum up the themes and messages of Laundrette into a single word, that word would be belonging. Every single character in the film is defined both by their desire to belong somewhere and by the actions they are willing to take to achieve that belonging. While Omar is not out to any of his family members, he is fully comfortable in his own skin and never questions who he is as a gay man. However, in stark contrast to his extended family, he cannot fathom the idea of Pakistan being his home. He has lived his whole life in London, and thus he sees Britain as his country and home. But Omar is also faced with the fact that In an increasingly anti-immigrant Britain, this home that he loves may never learn to love him back. Johnny, meanwhile, is so desperate to be accepted by his community that he is willing to hide his sexuality and even take up an openly anti-gay cause just to have some sense of belonging. I can't find any definite link between the fictional Johnny and the real-life Nicky Crane, and this film was made before Crane came out, so such a link is unlikely, but even so, Johnny's struggle with his identity as a poor white Briton and a gay man is eerily reminiscent of the struggle of the real-life neo-Nazi icon. The skinhead crowd provides Johnny with a real family, and if its price of admission is Johnny staying in the closet, he is more than willing to pay that simply because he is that desperate to belong somewhere. The laundrette then provides Omar and Johnny both with a means to escape the confines society has placed around them. As an industry that is looked down upon by society, but which is also necessary for that society's continued functioning, the laundrette is a perfect means for even a lowly Pakistani like Omar, or white trash like Johnny, to make a stable income and live a good life.
In this damn country, which we hate and love, you can get anything you want. It's all spread out and available. That's why I believe in England. Only you have to know how to squeeze the tits of the system.
They'll never be able to live in the lap of luxury, but they'll always be comfortable, and they'll have a place of their own, where they can live and be their full, true selves, despite how society at large might regard their kind. And sometimes that's all you can do. Maybe the only community you can truly find is with one other person, but even if it's only that one person, that's all you need to know that you are not alone. Number 5, front cover. Our final film takes us back to New York City. Ryan Fu is a Chinese-American fashion stylist struggling with the lack of mobility opportunities in his field when his magazine offers him what could be his big break. Qi Xiaoning, a rising star in Chinese cinema, has come to New York for a photo shoot, and he has specifically requested Ryan to design for him. Ryan soon discovers that Ning has great ambitions, hoping to represent New China on the world stage, and to tell stories that have otherwise been neglected by the Chinese cinema establishment. He chose Ryan to design his clothes because he hopes that, as a fellow Chinese, Ryan will give him the same respect and effort as any other client, and will be a valuable ally in Ning's quest to transform Chinese cinema. However, as Ryan and Ning grow closer, Ryan discovers that Ning is hiding a very important secret from the public eye, which, if uncovered, could derail his entire career. This film is an interesting case of culture clash because rather than being a broad East versus West story, the clashing is focused on two specific subcultures in China and America. The first clash is, obviously, between the Chinese LGBT community and the American LGBT community, but the second, equally important clash is between those who are in front of the camera and those who are behind it. This may seem like an odd place for the film to focus on, but Front Cover does an expert job in showing how the two subcultures are connected, not just to each other, but to the concept of pride. The film industry has always been a home for members of the LGBT community, ever since the early days of Hollywood.
Boys will be boys.
However, even in the days of James Whale, George Cukor, and Henry Wilson, there has always been one single ironclad rule. Never let the papers know. If you do your job well and you make the studio money, no one gives a damn who you go to bed with. But if the press or public ever finds out, then you're done. Finished. History. Because the press loves scandal. The paparazzi loves to drag out skeletons from celebrities' closets, sink their teeth into the marrow, and see who else they can find and destroy. Throughout all of this, of course, is the fact that how major a public scandal is reflected in how public the individual is. I mentioned James Whale, George Cukor, and Henry Wilson, and they were very prominent and very influential gay men in Hollywood, but how many of you even know who those people were? Producers and directors like them are certainly less well known than leading men like Rock Hudson or Richard Chamberlain.
And there was the terrible, terrible danger of being outed, because I was a romantic lead, for God's sake. That was my whole career, practically. And to be outed at that time would have been disaster. So I had that fear, and I also feared that I was a sort of unworthy, something terribly wrong with me person.
This ties into one of the clashes between Ryan and Ning. Ryan is out and proud. After years of bullying as a child and self-loathing as an adult, he has finally come to terms with who he is, and he is unconcerned with who knows it. However, even as someone in a very high-profile industry, Ryan himself is not nearly as publicly known as the models he designs for. In contrast, Ning is a very public figure, and indeed, he actively cultivates publicity to help his cause of changing the global narrative of China. Instead of an oppressive dictatorship or a third world cesspool, Ning wants the world to know the glamour and glory of new China. To do that, though, he needs all the public goodwill he can get. And so, even as Ning and Ryan slowly grow to love each other, Ning must keep up appearances for the sake of his dream.
Which one is? I have saying. You have to plow in order to harvest. You have to give up something in order to achieve your dream.
However, even if Ning cannot be out, he can be proud. The concept of gay pride is something Ning finds alien and abnormal at the beginning of the film. Why do you feel the need to flaunt your sexuality in the open like that? He asks Ryan. However, over the course of the movie, Ning comes to understand that pride is not so much a public display as a private affirmation. Ryan is proud not because he dresses flamboyantly, has camp mannerisms, or attends gay clubs and pride parades, but because he can look himself in the mirror and say, I am gay, and I love myself. Pride is ultimately just another word for self-love. Knowing who you are, and knowing that you are enough. Front cover says that it is okay to be gay, but also that it is okay to be publicly closeted. There are plenty of legitimate and valid reasons for someone to not let the world know about their true selves. However, the film urges these people, even if you cannot be out, you must be proud.
Oh, and it wasn't until I was about 68 when I was writing that book that finally that area of self-dislike vanished completely. I mean, I had done a lot of work. I had a lot of therapy, I had done a lot of spiritual work, had wonderful friends, etc. But it wasn't until that late in my life that suddenly all that fear, all that self-dislike, it was as if an angel had put her hand on my head. It's going to make me cry. And said, it's over. All that part is over. All that negative stuff is over.
Even if you are the only person that you can share your identity with, yours is the most important approval. Yours is the most important acceptance. Yours is the most important love. If you cannot love yourself, if you cannot be proud, then you will spend your life being utterly miserable and never know peace or happiness. So be proud of who you are. It's been 5 years since Obergefell v. Hodges, and I'd like to say that things have completely changed. But they haven't. There is still far more to be done. Many more laws, minds, and attitudes that need to change before we can say that things have fully progressed. But gay people aren't going anywhere. And if we keep at this fight, then maybe, just maybe, we'll see a day when things have truly changed for the better. In the meantime, I'm Marco Keen, signing off, and I hope you liked this video. If you did, and you'd like to see me make more, please leave a like or comment down below, share my video via Twitter, Facebook, or other means, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.